you all for joining us today. I'm excited to have Chris Wagner with us to talk about Dataverse. He's been using it early and often, so I'm excited to hear kind of what the experiences are like and things like that, and how everything kind of works and where to go from there. So with that, Chris, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jonathan, and thanks everybody for coming and going over this. I hope what I have to say is going to be informative and useful for you as you're working at looking at how you're going to build out your data offering inside of that low code, no code space. So this is something that I think I was approached by Microsoft on actually 2 years ago. We began our conversations around this point, so I'm very excited that it's now generally available and it's something that people are out there using and beginning to build out their solutions on. All right, so little quick agenda. We're going to go over, introductions just so you guys can become more familiar with me because, while I know a few of you, I'm sure, I don't have such an ego to think that everyone knows who that guy am. We're going to talk through a little bit of the history around the Dataverse. We're going to talk about how you can use the Dataverse inside your organization, the types of solutions that it can do. We'll talk through what that solution design is like. And then we'll make sure that we touch in on some core concepts. So if you guys are hit with some things and this stuff seems new to you, or this stuff won't seem brand new to you, it'll be something that you're familiar with and you're accustomed to dealing with. All right. So my name is Chris Wagner. I'm the analytics architect for Rockwell Automation. I provide solution design and support broadly to the global enterprise analytics teams that Rockwell Automation has, which means I provide a degree of support and consumption for about 1,400 Power BI Pro developers. I provide more detailed support for our 400 or so business unit content creators who share things through Power BI Premium, and then even more detailed yet, solution support for a handful of our capability teams who are actively growing and building out solutions inside this platform. I'm also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. I just got that in 2000, so I'm on month 10 of that. If anyone is ever interested in the MVP journey, happy to walk you through that and talk you through what that means. What it means to be an MVP and the process to get there, because it's not straightforward. I totally did it wrong for like 5 years and completely changed everything and how I was doing my MVP pre-work in order to actually get it. So I've also been a member of the Power BI and Power Platform Client Advisory Board for the last 5 years. Well, for 5 years, I've been on the Power BI Client Advisory Board. It's only in the last year that I joined the Power Platform Client Advisory Board. If you're not familiar with the Client Advisory Board, these are leads from major companies get together with the Microsoft team 2 to 4 times a month. Basically around a lot of their like sprint retros, and when it comes to planning and feature selections, we provide a great deal of feedback on various topics that the platform is doing. So we work very hard with Microsoft to ensure that the platform is going to be where we need it to be 18 months from now. My biggest significant contribution there, or the thing that I'm happiest and proudest to say that I contributed in some small way, is the new composite models that the Power BI service rolled out in December. This was something 5 years ago we hit on as a major component that the Power BI service needed to offer. As part of that client advisory board, we sat down with the Microsoft Power BI team and we came up with, I think it was 89 deliverables that the Power BI service was going to need to add in order to deliver that functionality. And it's been very exciting to watch over the last 5 years as those individual pieces, came to light, came to fruition, and then eventually culminating in the composite models. So very excited about that. In 2020, Rockwell Automation also received a Future Edge 50 award for their work in the analytics space and the integration of natural language generation, which I was a significant contributor on. So we're very excited about that. And I'm also the founder of Kratos BI. This is a website where I highlight all of the data gods that exist inside the universe. Please come out, check it out. There's lots of good stuff. I try to do data gods of the week. Sometimes I don't get one every week, but if you're looking for guidance and direction, it's a good place to go to get and understand all of the resources that are available for you. All right, but that's me. Now, this presentation is for you. I don't do these things for my health. I want to make sure that you guys are getting something from this. So we are not in a large enough group where, like, you coming off mute and talking to me is going to be a problem. If there's going to be 500, I'd ask Jonathan or Anthony to field questions. But if you have questions about anything that I'm talking about, please do come off mute, ask that question. I'm happy to answer them. I do run several user groups internally at Rockwell where I'm like often and regularly put on the spot. So please do not feel awkward in asking me a question. I'm very adept to answering even the most random of questions in these types of forums. So please do ask any questions that you have. All right, let's get to it. So I want to first level set where we're at and get us to why are we talking about the Dataverse, okay? And when we look at the enterprise, the enterprise in, I think it's 1989 or 98 or whatever it is, we introduced SQL Server for companies to start to manage and build out databases for applications and data marts for analytics and all of that good stuff, right? Shortly afterwards, there was a recognition that we needed to offer something as that's simplified version of this that an individual could work with, right? So thus we saw the advent of the Access database get born, and as that evolved, we began to see that people began to use introducing additional features and functionality and other tooling to provide a similar experience, right? So eventually when SharePoint came along in the, mid 90s? When did SharePoint become a thing? Anyone? I think it was mid 90s. Maybe it's 2000.
Yeah, I think it was late 90s, right? Or mid 90s, yeah, one of the two.
Yeah, late 90s.
Okay. So as SharePoint came along, there was a recognition that we needed to advance and provide other ways for allowing users to be storing information that they would then share and use, right? SharePoint is an excellent way of doing that. A number of different methods. The SharePoint list has been around forever. In fact, it's been so popular. Microsoft just introduced it. What is it called? The O365 list, right? So I mean, Microsoft has recognized the power of the list, what that can do for a user. So that's really evolved as we've gone along. But the challenge that has really came up, and the gap that we saw inside the solution was on the access side. There wasn't a real good way to provide people with relational databases, right? If you're going to stand up a SQL server or you need a SQL data warehouse, you're going to be in the enterprise. You're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to spin those things up. But that didn't work for a lot of teams, a lot of ad hoc uses, like what was done with it on the access side of the house. And this is something that is very necessary, right? Like companies and teams are frequently spinning up and needing to create these relational databases to help drive applications and help drive the work that they're doing. And as we start to look at historically, the challenges that we had in this framework, especially when it came to access, was, I mean, if you remember the dark days before 2010, access was in a completely different, programming language. If you needed to, if someone went out and built this huge, massive thing in Access, there was a massive lift to upgrade that into something that the enterprise could support. That's why in 2010 they rebuilt the Access, so that was backed fully by a SQL Server database. So that lift became easier. So Microsoft recognized that as we started to look at the cloud and what the offerings were, they needed to come up with a solution that was not just a relational database solution, but one that would scale and provide a great deal of functionality to users. And that's where Dataverse was, or the common data model was created. They figured if we could come up with the basic shape of the way data is most often consumed, and give users the ability to work in it, make small adjustments to it, we could really help users go from 0 to 60 when it comes to building out and deploying solutions. All right. Now, where does the Dataverse fit? There's always going to be the need for SharePoint lists that exist out there. We're just seeing that proliferate. We're seeing more and more of that come out, especially with the O365 lists, right? But Dataverse, on the other hand, is an ideal solution. Well, it comes in two different flavors, which is something you really need to be aware of, right? So there's Dataverse for Teams. This is the big announcement that Microsoft had in December. This is out. It's GA. Dataverse for Teams is excellent when you need that relational database. You're going to have less than 1 million records, right? It's going to be something small, and it's going to be less than 2 gigs in size. Now, the big kicker and the big key thing here is this is free, right? So this means that if you're trying to build out scalable solutions that you can deploy across your enterprise, or if you're looking to monetize as a service that you offer your customers, this is something that you can build out, script out, and deploy as part of your solution, right? So this becomes infinitely scalable when it comes to that broad-based consumption, as long as you're operating inside these frameworks. Now, if you need more than this, you need more than 1 million records, you need more than 2 gigs of data, then you can upgrade into the fully fledged Dataverse. I'm going to toss out a whole bunch of just FYIs or points of awareness around that. Is you can get hit with some significant licensing fees there. I would highly recommend, if you're going down that path of the pro Dataverse space, you spend some significant time with your licensing department and make sure that you understand the ramifications of what it would mean to introduce the full-fledged Dataverse, or even Power Apps, Power Automate, the pro versions of that, what that would mean to your company. I think the licensing is $35 a user a month, and that's not just developer, it's users. So very easy for that to become incredibly expensive. So just be aware of that. Okay. And then, if you need something that's greater than that, right? Or you have a Dataverse environment that's growing, it's becoming successful, that's when you should look at, making that step to that Azure SQL DB or even Synapse Analytics type offering. These are much more scalable, solution items that are out there, but typically it's going to be driven through the IT. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about where this solution fits? No? Excellent.
One question I just kind of came up with as I was, kind of thinking about some of the examples that you're running through is, if you were to, go out there and pick a database for something, what stops you from picking a SharePoint list versus Dataverse for Teams, versus Dataverse when you look at the low code, no code solutions? Is there, ramifications from a Power BI standpoint? Are there other limitations that you've run into personally, just from a personal experience? It doesn't need to be everything under the sun.
Yeah. So the big thing that I have found is The reason to make the transition over to Teams is when you need that relational database experience, it can be really hard to replicate that with lists. That's not saying it's not possible. It can be very hard to do that inside the list space without a lot of overhead and a lot of processing. And I'm also a big preacher around keeping your solutions as simple as possible. If you can do it with a SharePoint list, do it with the SharePoint list. Don't complicate what you're doing because there's something new and great out there. Happy to help people upgrade to the Dataverse, but if something can be done with another solution, don't overcomplicate it, right?
Right.
The other big advantage you get with the Dataverse is that model that's the models that are out there and how they're going to start to integrate with various template apps that are coming out and becoming available. I think that's some of the visioning stuff that Microsoft has. I've seen around that makes that very attractive for teams, especially if you're working inside of Dynamics. The interaction and integration with Dynamics can really make this a powerful solution. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Always chime in. All right. So this is where it fits. So, you've got your today I learned type thing. So we're going to take a little step back and, make sure that people understand, the basic components that are out there. What the heck? My next slide looks weird. Oh, okay. There's animation to it. Sorry. So when it comes to the Power Platform, these are the various components that make up that Power Platform: Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. Again, I think when it comes to knowledge and understanding inside the community, this is, Power BI has been around for a long time. People get this. Power Apps have been around for a few years. This is becoming more mature. Same with Power Automate. If you haven't had a chance to work with Power Virtual Agents, highly recommend you do check this out. It is a new feature that Microsoft has offered where it makes it very easy for you to stand up and spin up the virtual agents, basically chatbots that you can extend outside of your organizations to make available to people. Do be aware, I think these cost $1,000 a month, so you're not going to just spin them up to answer questions internally unless you're for BS, right? You're going to incur a cost, so please be aware of that. Underpinning all of these tools are three basic core concepts and principles that are commonly accessible across all of them. The first being Microsoft's Dataverse. This is the data platform that is going to make the foundation that becomes available across all of these. I would say the advantage inside the Dataverse, especially for Dynamics clients, is you're going to see that it's going to inherit a lot of the functionalities and capabilities that are in Dynamics are just going to naturally blend into the Dataverse. And then as we start to look forward in time over the next 6 to 24 months, you're going to see more of these features for Dynamics integration just light up across this entire platform, and that's going to come through Dataverses. Okay. Data connectors drive your connections through, and then AI builders is what helps power that data science or that artificial intelligence integration like we see in the virtual agents. This too is going to have a broader impact on Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate as we move, or the AI builder is going to, as we move through the next 6 to 18 months. So very excited to see these advances in this space. All right. So as we look at all of these, the big key and function, the benefit that comes along with this platform is that it is integrated, right? Each of these tools is all brought to a common platform where it's easy to integrate them. It's easy to bring, automate, your analysis, bring things together. It's really easy to have that conversation as we start to integrate the virtual agents, but as we also start to integrate teams inside this space, this becomes an incredible source as a one-stop shop for a lot of people as they're working and operating inside this tool, right? And when it comes to building out in a low-code, no-code environment, the more you can simplify, the more you can already have integrated your solutions, the easier it is going to be for people to develop and work inside this space, right? One of the big things we're seeing at Rockwell Automation is that we're actually seeing a growth and adoption of the Power Platform radically faster than we saw when it came to the Power BI space. And that's without any real prompting or direction that we're giving people because they're finding that they need to do it, right? This helps them do their work and they do it in a consistent way. A little aside, we actually had a young guy at Rockwell right out of college. He came into a department and team that has been around for decades, and for decades they have been like running 24/7 to try to keep up with the demand and the work. And they've really struggled to keep up, right? That's just things are moving too fast for them. It was, too difficult for them to, just meet their minimum things that they were looking to deliver as part of that team. Well, this young guy came in, and over the course of his first few months, when he discovered to automate, he went through and automated a lot of his tasks, freeing up 60-80% of his time so that he was able to work on not just the minimum requirements of things that he was delivering, but the long-term things that the stretch goals that no one else was able to get to. When people recognized that, they brought him forward to do more of the workflow management and do more of that application integration. And by building this out, he was actually able to automate a lot of work of his entire department. So that department went from like struggling to keep up and maintain everything and like working super hard to knocking it out of the park, so that they were crushing it, and it was all because of the automation and building out using a lot of these new tools. If you ask him, the way he looks at Dataverse and the opportunities there is he had to do a lot of rework, duplicated work, and he had a lot of challenges in building this out because he didn't have access to that relational database inside that space. When we started to implement this, that made his life a heck of a lot easier as he started to bring in the Dataverse toolings, right?
Hey, Chris, at Rockwell, when you look at the number of makers and the people that are building apps or building flows, Power BI reports, is it typically, the people that have been in that space for a long time? I know that, Power Apps and Power Automate are relatively new, but I'm kind of going back to that same story. Is it typically the newer people that are kind of, adopting this and, automating and kind of taking it to the next level, or is it a mixture? Where are you seeing that at Rockwell?
Well, so we're very fortunate that Rockwell is a company of engineers. We've been an engineering-minded organization for like 120 years. So we are very process-driven. We have lots of Six Sigma, certified individuals. We are constantly running, those types of programs to get more people trained up in it. So I think we saw, while there were a lot of new people who like took to the new tools and wanted to definitely get involved, there were a lot of people who had been around for a long time who, saw this as an opportunity to address some of those issues and saw how easy it was to get in there and build some of this stuff out. That was just, frankly, it was, it was too difficult and painful for them to go any other way. We saw that, using our classical like IT capability team model, it took a long time for a business, unit to say, hey, I need this project. That project goes into the backlog. That project gets balanced out, and it moves up or moves down, and executives have no problem getting projects through. But people who are not necessarily executives, it could take them 18 to 36 months to get a project through IT. And often it was hard to, definitively say that there was an ROI that justified it, right? Especially that amount of effort. Power Automate and Power Apps really helped simplify that, so that, the business was able to run and build things out on a much faster basis. Take with COVID, when COVID first hit, Rockwell, like every other company on the planet, was caught very flat-footed, right? Like, we were not prepared to go on lockdown and stop all of our engineers and salespeople and service reps from visiting all of all of the countries that are out there and all of the manufacturers around the world. In fact, because we provided hands-on solution support for critical resources needed to address the pandemic, we couldn't stop. We just suddenly had to have all sorts of new processes that needed to be automated.
You almost saw an uptick during that time.
In some sectors, we definitely saw an uptick. I'm going to point to our fiscal reporting for whether or not we actually saw an uptick or not.
Oh, I mean, as far as automation and such.
Yeah, especially on the on the low code, no code side, we had an individual who had a need to automate tracking all of the service reps who were going to the various factories around the globe, and all the sign-offs and paperworks and testing, right? He built that out inside of Power Apps within on a Sunday afternoon. He just sat down, started watching YouTube videos,
A weekend
and at
warrior.
8 o'clock at night, he published this out. And by the end of the first 2 weeks, we had all of our regulatory compliances that addressed every country on the planet in place to manage those service reps. Once that word got out, all of a sudden, all of our sales reps, everyone who was traveling, we began to scale that solution, right? And as it started to grow, one of their biggest challenges was, hey, we need more than a Microsoft list to manage this data. Now, they may do with lots of Microsoft lists, but that was a large lift. This is
right.
the perfect type of situation for a Dataverse type solution, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of speaks to some of that rapid development. The word gets out, you have a solution that works really well, and then it's rapid fire on the back end. People are, buying in, they want more of it. And then, it's that discussion about the data source and so forth.
Yeah, it becomes really hard to manage and grow, right? But the nice thing about it is, you can do those things, right? Awesome. Now, when we talk about the Power Platform and Dataverse, this may throw some people off because the Dataverse has gone through many different names out there. So if you're not familiar, the Dataverse initially was called the Common Data Model or Common Data Service. So if you're going out trying to find like documentation on this and you're not finding Dataverse out there, in fact, if you just Google Dataverse, you'll find more documentation on Harvard's Dataverse for internal databases at Harvard than you will on Dataverse for the moment being. I would imagine that's going to grow and change as time goes on, but just be aware that Dataverse is a relatively new name for that. Last summer, Microsoft had, when Dataverse was going, or I'm sorry, the Common Data Model was becoming public, GA. They for a handful of days they called it DataFlex when the lawyers got involved and Microsoft got sued because DataFlex is already a name, and then it had no name for like 3 weeks, then became Project Oakdale for several months, but now the lawyers apparently are very happy with it being called Dataverse. Okay. When we talk about what is the Dataverse, this is that functional deployment of the Common Data Model that we've been talking about. So those, when you deploy a Dataverse, you're going to actually see that there are lots of common entities that are going to get created as part of your solution. How much or how little you use any of these things is up to you. It's very customizable, and we'll kind of go into some of that stuff as we get into it. But the idea is that framework gets put out there and becomes immediately accessible and usable by people, right? The advantage here, though, is this is very easy for people to secure and manage inside the Dataverse for Teams and inside of Dataverse. This brings lots of advantages, some risk that does come along with this. Please, because especially with Dataverse for Teams, this inherits a lot of the security settings that you may have when it comes to external users inside your company, right? So if you're allowing, external clients to come in and work inside your Teams environment, so they can see docs, they can see information that's in there. By using Dataverse for Teams, you can build out applications that store information in a relational management or relational structure that can then be accessible by these outside people. So that's a huge advantage of Dataverse for Teams. Is that can be something that is very hard to do otherwise. Like I know Rockwell, we have a lot of policies that will actually prevent someone who has, even if you have access to an app, someone finds a way to get you into it, you won't actually be able to access any of the data in the app because you don't have a RID, right? This is a good means of enabling people to access that information. Something to be aware of, but you're going to need to manage it, watch over it. But this is something you can do. Okay. Now, when we talk about how this is architected and how this is designed, it all starts with that API, right? How does the Dataverse interact with different things? It's all through API-driven architecture, right? So first level is our APIs when it comes to security, authorization. We add in the business logic to drive that. We then talk about our data storage, our modeling, our reporting, those types of concepts. And then, I'm sorry, there's our storage, right? Everything is built in such a way as to be scalable, consumable, and really in a similar modern framework that we're seeing inside of our existing enterprise data spaces. This in turn ensures that any solution that's being built out there can be scaled up if necessary, right? Because they're using common tooling, because they're using common cloud services and functions, this can be scaled up into an enterprise-grade solution to address any of the the largest potential needs that your company might have. Okay.
Hey Chris, is that something that you guys run into often where, somebody gets a hold of a solution like we mentioned earlier, and then you need to upgrade, figure out where you're going to go? Is that something that, is common at Rockwell, where not necessarily it's a Rockwell thing, but I guess I'm asking more of a generic question.
So that's a great question. That has classically plagued the low code, no code, let users have access technology environment, right? And that's why I kind of brought up the whole access issue, right? Like people used to, I can remember in the 2000s, like finding out that, oh, the bank I work at runs all of their global reconciliation of monetary processing through an access database that, Kelly manages and secures, and she's automated, millions of dollars moving in and out of various banking accounts at the bank through this access database, and it's this huge security violation. Now we need to upgrade that out of that, and it became a 6 to 9 month project and engagement to make that actually work outside of that access space. So that was a huge problem. That has continued to plague any of these like, hey, let the users do it type frameworks. That these solutions that are critical or need to be secured get built out, not maliciously, right? Like, Kelly was just trying to get her job done and needed something, that IT wasn't providing, and so she did that in Access, and frankly, good for her, because then the code was at least there for people to follow instead of like having to talk with Dina and remember like the 400 steps she took to manually do something. So, but Microsoft, when they approached this low code, no code platform, they learned, from decades of dealing with, IT administrators like pulling their hair out around this stuff, and said, okay, hey, as we do this, we're going to do this in a way that uses all of the tools that our cloud has to offer, is scalable, and can move up and be built up. So, have we done this at Rockwell? Yes, we've definitively done this in a number of cases. We've scaled up solutions that have been built out in there, but this is a universal need when it comes to people adopting these self-service and Dataverse type tools, right?
Right.
And the reason I really like the Dataverse tool is because it does use common coding patterns that are scalable, right? So, you're often using Power Query to ingest data inside that framework, right? So, well, that's just M, which means you can run that in Data Factory, and instead of sending it into Dataverse, you could send it into Synapse. So, literally as much storage as you conceivably could need, you can have, right, without having to recode everything. Does that jive?
Oh yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Awesome.
I think going back to what you said, it's kind of like you're not going to have the shadow IT. I think that's a big piece that I heard there. Well, you're going to have less of it anyways. You can still start something and probably get away with a little bit, but and then outside of that, you're learning that common tool, and it's not some tool that you only use in this little spot. It's something that can, if you learn it in the position that you're in today, it might be beneficial for you, down the road as well.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Good question. All right. The great thing when it comes to the Dataverse is how integrated it is across the entire platform, right? So when we see how it's running and interacting with Power Apps, all of those tools that a cloud architect or a solution architect would have to build out and add into your infrastructure are automatically built as you start to work inside that Dataverse, right? So building out that load balancer and all these different components are something that's just done in the background, right? Like you don't necessarily have to be concerned with, managing, SQL Elastic pools or what your data lake storage has to look like, or Cosmos DB, right? All of this stuff is brought together inside of the tooling without, you as a user having to be concerned with any of these things or managing any of the costs that are associated with it. Especially if you could stay in that, Dataverse for Teams, that is a fantastic solution that is broadly available. Okay. Now, when we talk about the core concepts when it comes to the Dataverse, I want to talk about, it breaks out into three pieces: tables, logic, and security. When we go into the tables, it's going to create, every time you spin up that Dataverse, as I've said, you're going to get your core tables that are going to come along with that, right? You're going to see that account table, you're going to see activity, you're going to see contact. All of these things are going to come up, and they're going to get automatically not populated, but they're going to be defined for you so that, using the most common definitions that are out there. If you have specific needs to customize, you're more than welcome to customize these, columns, enhance and build out and bring forward your, different relationships between the tables. And just like in any SharePoint list, you can create forms and views that sit on top of these. So exorbitantly powerful. Some words of, I don't know if it's necessarily warning, but pro tip, you want to encourage your users to modify these tables or these entities as little as possible. The reason for that being the integrations that you're going to see when it comes to like out of the box template flows, template apps. they're going to be designed to sit on top of the Dataverse or the CDM, using the information that exists where it is. If you go through and you heavily edit out or edit these entities, you're going to find that as you try to implement these template apps and as users start to pull in these functions that are available inside the service, they're going to have to do more work when it comes to like customizing that tooling that's out there, which may be beneficial and valuable if, to your organization, like if like I gotta modify this to do this so I can make my joins, I can do my imports, hey, great, do that. But if it's like, I like to have my emails defined as 100 varchar versus whatever it has, don't do that. Leave it alone. Just let it be. Okay. Now, one of the big things that also comes along with Dataverse is as you have mappings in, it's got a lot of logic already built in and really easy to enhance and drive to add in business rules that help ensure that the information that you're running through your pipelines is secure, it's accurate, it is what users would expect it to do. It's very easy to add in additional and new business rules, document these flows and build out workflows around around your Dataverse entities and the data that exists inside your space. A big one here is approval workflows. This is something that was classically very easy to do in SharePoint. It unfortunately got more difficult. But with this, it's a little easier if you're using the Dataverse. Can make that a little easier to leverage the template apps that are out there. So this is something that does become easier for people to use and develop in. All right. When we talk security, the great thing around the Dataverse is it does basically, especially in Dataverse for teams, is it follows the security levels that you create inside your team framework. So if you have owners, you have they have admin rights on the Dataverse, and it basically flows through to everything inside the universe. It's something that's very easy for people to work with, secure, and understand who can do what. And when it comes to low code, no code, making sure that people understand how these pieces all fit together easily is going to be the biggest piece of this. Okay. Now, I've talked for a long time. I've hit on a lot of the high level pieces. I've gone hopefully not too far into any of the weeds around what Dataverse is and how you can use that inside your organization and things you can do. What questions do people have for me on Dataverse and its usage patterns, or anything at all? Anything?
Somebody's got to have a question. Just waiting to ask it. The perfect time.
What would you need to actually program it? Examples.
So it's so if I could show you a demo, I definitely would. I unfortunately can't at
Not
this point in
necessarily
time.
demos, but where's the training films and?
Yeah, so there's a number of great films out on YouTube. I can share some links over with you guys, but it is point and click. It's once you have it installed, and I will just give people a word of just FYI. Once you enable a Dataverse inside of inside of Teams or inside of a workspace in Power Apps, excuse me. Once you enable it, it does take 10 to 20 minutes for all the entities to get set up and become available for you. So just be aware that there's a little lag there. But it's super easy for people to work and operate in. The entities just all appear inside of your Power Apps or Teams environments that you've created, and it's just a matter of going in and defining each one of those inside of inside of your applications or inside of your flows and automate. Great question, John. Does that answer your question?
Be nice if you actually give us some pointers to what films or what YouTubes and such. How to get started, how to install it, how to fire up your first app.
Yeah, I can provide some links on that. I don't have that in my deck right here, but I can get you some of those links. Happy to. Excellent. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of speak on that a little bit. Oh, looks like John actually, another John was gonna mention something.
Yeah, hey Chris, real quick, when you're saying
Sure.
not to change the tables, not to edit the tables too much, is that basically don't change the current fields that are there, or not even really add fields?
Great clarification. And yes, if you need to add something, add away, right? It's try to avoid changing any of the current fields that are in there. Not saying don't. Just a pro tip is you'll find out you're going to be more able to use a lot of the out of the box template apps and template flows that Microsoft and others publish if you haven't edited the out of the box fields that are there. Okay. But take that, as I always look at it like the, 80-20 rule, right? Like if 80% of the time you can avoid changing it, that's great. And just, still go in and be crazy with it. Does that jive, John?
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, this thing is not like a relation. I heard it's like a relational database. It's kind of a cheap or free relational database for Power Apps. But this thing's populated with sales data, with like dynamics data.
Great question. It is a free, the Dataverse for Teams is a free solution that is available for people to use and leverage. When it gets created, all that gets created are empty entities inside of the framework. So it's like basically it's a blank database with tables and fields already created for you. The power when it comes to CRM integration is there's a lot of data flows that are out there that are, template data flows that allow for easy integration between CRM dynamics and these various Dataverses. So you'll find that it's really easy for you to flow information out of CRM into the Dataverse so that you can drive and power apps using that. Does that make sense, John? So it's not populated automatically. You'll have to do some work to get it populated. But there's template apps that make it easy for you to do that.
Yeah, maybe even just diving into what the differences are again of, the Dataverse for Teams and Dataverse, sure. Because I know that can be a really, there is a clear line, but it's not very clear, all the time. So it's something that, I'm always, re-educating and working with folks on to showcase, the differences between those two.
Sure. The big difference is, in my mind, and the way I look at it, is around cost. Now, the regular Dataverse, you can scale beyond, because the free version has some real hard caps, right? Can't have more than 1 million records, can't exceed 2 gigabytes. It's a relational database and it's free. As long as you could stay within those parameters, it is an excellent option for teams or applications that need a database and they need it free for integration and want to keep it as low cost. This is a great solution for you. It can also be upgraded to the full-on Dataverse. But it's not right out of the box. Some other notes on Dataverse for Teams and the apps that you build out inside of Teams. They're only accessible through Teams. You can't access them through the classic Power App portal. So if you have users going in and using lots of Power Apps, they're going to find that their Power Apps for Teams and that are using the Dataverse for Teams are not going to show up in there. So that's just one kind of little caveat you have to be aware of between these two solutions. If you want your app to exist inside Teams and inside of the Power App space, then you'd be talking about upgrading to the full-on Dataverse. Excellent question, Anthony.
So Chris, can you connect the Power Automate to the Dataverse for Teams?
Yep, 100%. And if you're staying inside that O365 platform, you don't have any need for additional licensing. So, if all of your files and all of your data comes in through emails and it's dropped into a SharePoint bucket, or they're all you're gathering information from several different SharePoint lists, you can bring those together using Power Automate into your Dataverse environment, and you could drive it through there.
Okay, so
Again,
to expand on that, so with the open API against the Teams for Dataverse, then I could connect potentially the SharePoint development framework to it and expose the data through that process as far as getting the data into SharePoint?
You should be able to. I don't know of any limitations on that, but I have not tried that specific item. So if you ran into issues, I guess not that I'd be surprised.
I haven't tried it. Just I've always run into the issues with the limitations of the SharePoint list and looking for an alternative solution. And that was potentially one, because if it is the web API, technically you should be able to expose that data into SharePoint then.
Correct. Yes, and that's how it's designed, right? It's designed to be broadly accessible across the entire O365 platform, whatever you're doing. So, if it's not available and does not work today, I would fully expect that you're going to start to see these things become more available in the future. Now, that's with the full-on Dataverse. The Dataverse for Teams is this free version is isolated inside of the Teams space. I know there are restrictions there that are preventing it from being more broadly accessible. I don't know if there's workarounds around that. I have not played with it enough to, see if I can expose it, outside of the Teams space. But the Dataverse, you can definitely do that with.
Yeah, I guess I was looking for the Dataverse for Teams because it is free.
Sure.
That's a key word for everyone, right?
It sure is.
All right, thanks, Chris.
No problem. And I'm honestly, I talk with Microsoft 4 to 5 times a week. I talk with this Power Automate team on 2 or 3 times a month. Every time I talk with them, I push them on lowering the cost of the stuff because their initial price point is crazy. I think they need to, really straighten that out, because this needs to be a progression, right? You start with a free SharePoint list. You need more capabilities. You need that relational stuff. You move to a Dataverse for Teams. When this is not scaling, or you need to scale, you need to be able to go to that next step, and that cost needs to be comparable, right? I mean, an Azure SQL DB that people will be able to access and do whatever the heck they want is $350 a month, right? Like that's your baseline entry into databases. Dataverse can't cost your platform, $3 million because you start to add in Dataverse, right? Or any of the Power platforms. So we need to we need to help Microsoft see the light on that stuff. So I'm working on that.
Hey, Chris, one question that comes kind of with that is, do you know anything about, permissions in Microsoft Dataverse for Teams, if there's going to be any updates there that you can give us?
I do not know of publicly not NDA changes that have been announced inside that space. I will say that Microsoft has, for the last 5 years, have been working very closely with the Agile framework, taking user feedback and building out and delivering on stories. They're exceptionally good at that. So, there's a site out there for like ideas, at at Power Apps or Power. I think you'd want to do it through Power Apps. About about enhancing the security, I go out there and make sure you make that known so I can get prioritized. But yeah, I can't.
I wasn't sure if there was anything you could share. That's all. I didn't want you to slip, but if there was things you could share, our ears are always open.
So things have only slipped 3 times. I've only slipped 3 times, and then those 3 features that I slipped on never got delivered because they just kept getting bumped. And so I'm like, wow, I look like I'm just making stuff up at this point. So.
Yeah, you're almost bad luck.
Right. So I'm not letting anything out there. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, that was certainly helpful from a Teams and the full blown version. Kind of just diving into that and what you get for the price range and so forth. So yeah, thank you for diving closer into that. Sure. Any other, examples that you can kind of dive in that you've, contemplated using Dataverse or Dataverse for Teams, or maybe there's a reason why you went with SQL over Dataverse, or, vice versa?
And guys, I'm going to jump in too, because I can share my screen and share some stuff
Sure.
that might help to pull it together for folks. Because I know when I got started looking at it too, I was looking for the Dataverse button and there isn't one, right? So, trying to pull that together. I can share my screen, I think.
Yeah, please do. Because I haven't really found any starting point that's been really good.
Yeah, so let me know when you guys can see my screen here.
We can see.
Okay, so a couple of layers that help me out. So first, Dataverse is, and Chris, definitely correct me where I'm wrong because I'm a noob on this too, but the Power Apps app in Teams gets you into this, which is Dataverse for Teams. So here I can create an app, so a Power App or other things inside of this team and inside of a team. And in this one, I've got this dev team kind of set up. And then you can also kind of scroll through it here on the build side to now see for this Teams team, here are the entities and things I'm using. So I have a table, right, I got a table, I had a chat bot in there, I think. But right, so that's the right visual that you need to start with, right? There's nothing called Dataverse. There's no button anywhere. It starts, I think, with Power Apps app in Teams. So that being said, what happens under the covers a little bit is it's creating a Power Apps environment, but it's not one of these. I'll go with this one. It's not one of these that show up in Power Apps or Power Automate, where you have different environments. So those Teams-based environments are still hidden from you here because they're special. This Obsidian environment here is my Obsidian environment tied to Dynamic CRM. So that's got a Dynamic CRM database in it. Ad hoc is just the normal Office 365 one. But if you go into the admin center, an admin can see them all. And now you can see there's a Teams environment for that one team. There's another one here, and then I've got my production CRM environment and my default ad hoc environment. So that's what's kind of going on in a couple different ways. That it's magically happening in the Teams app to create this environment when you start. And then you use Teams Power Apps app to build and build it out from there.
Yeah, but a couple of points there too is the only time that you can really modify that table is through Teams. You have to be logged into Teams and be able to, you have to be an owner to modify that. You have either in the Power Apps app within Teams, or you're in this, back end, build mode where you can modify that database as well. So there's 2 ways you can do that. But those are the only two ways that you can really access that information. So I think it was John W.'s point earlier, these are the ways that you can access that information. I'm not sure if you can access that in SharePoint. It is still a bit newer, the way that they've implemented the Dataverse for Teams. So I'd be curious on that, on getting that answer too.
Yeah, if it works, it's going to be on the security of the team, right? On the Graph API on the back end, so it might work. Probably works.
Yeah, I too would be interested to know if that works, because especially the way that they've defined how this is going to work inside of Teams. It sounds like the intention is that it shouldn't, but I could totally be wrong, right?
Yeah, because the way that they encapsulate, the database there, it might be a little bit different than the regular Dataverse as well. So it's definitely an interesting use case, and not, I'm sure you're not the only one thinking about it.
Yeah, and so John, I did post my favorite YouTube video. It's a series of videos that a guy did. I think there's 6 of them. I posted the link to the first one. You can go through there and get more information on it. And then I did post a link to the Microsoft Learn path on getting introduced to Dataverse. If you haven't used the Learn platform before, exceptionally useful in getting you up to speed in these new toolings. It's one of the first places I go to for information to buff up my understanding of how each of these things and pieces work.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you with Microsoft Learn. It's a really good job of small, digestible components, and you learn something quickly. So I agree with that. And then the last thing on the screen here, and it finished quick enough, so I'll show you. So I clicked this inspection app to Teams, so I did one of the samples, and it finished within like 5 minutes or less. I had just done it while we were on the call. Now you can see that these apps, it had those templated apps kind of pre-built now and added to my dev team. If I go into that dev team, here now you can see the Power App that's built for the inspection and managing inspections. So those 2 apps are now showing up in this Teams channel as tabs. Well, that one, there it is. But now, again, now you're starting to see, now you got these, I would assume, Canvas apps kind of sitting inside of this Teams channel using the database in the Dataverse.
I think part of the fun there is, when you view it in Teams and it's just a second tab out there, a third tab that you're looking at, it looks and feels as if it is Teams. It is technically Teams, but they did a really great job of integrating that, where your end users aren't going to be confused because it's not loading this third-party looking type of tool. You can see they did a really good job of matching, the back color there, and the way that this app performs. They put some thought into it.
All right, so hopefully those visuals help, because it took me a few searches to figure out where the Dataverse button is, because there isn't one.
So I have a question, kind of. Hi, this is Rachel. Hi, Chris. I come at this from the SharePoint side of things, right? So I will admit that I'm not following along with a lot of what you're saying. I get all the shiny bits. It's super cool. I'm very excited about, database. That's nice. I'm working on a project right now where they are pushing what I consider to be the relational limits of a SharePoint list or 5. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm data kind of competent, as Chris knows. Teams, as we all know, is a UI that sits on top of SharePoint, right? All the data that's stored in your team is actually in a SharePoint site, and you can go into Teams and open in SharePoint, see all your team stuff in there in SharePoint. So that's great. Is there a way so if I were to build one of these things, so here's what I'm thinking of. Like I said, I have this one application that I'm working on that's pushing the limits of this relational database thing, and you can only have 12 lookup columns, blah, 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 so on and so forth, yada, 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 and everything else. But this is a public thing, so it needs to be on a SharePoint site and publicly accessible to everybody in one of our businesses and globally and everything else, preferably from SharePoint, not from Teams. These people are not savvy. These people are not savvy, okay? So trying to explain to them, to each of these thousands of people, oh, go to Teams and put in, no, not gonna work. I need to be able to give them a link. Is this an option, or is this no, Rachel, walk away?
That's a great question, Rachel. I think there's some things you might want to try to experiment with. It is designed to just go through Teams and only be accessible through there, but that doesn't mean you couldn't get clever and sneaky when it comes to embedding an object inside of your SharePoint site so that it's really Teams embedded in SharePoint. I think there might be some options there that you could potentially attempt, but it's not going to be something that's natively out of the box going to work inside of SharePoint today.
Because this is a
To
risk
my
that I called out for the project, that, hey, we're pushing the limits of SharePoint. SharePoint can be relational database-y-ish.
Yep.
And I warned them, I said, you're pushing the limits, and it's fine for now, but in a year and a half, when this thing gets really big and is handling all of the projects in SSB, this could be a problem, and we would need another solution that is more traditional database that can handle 1 million lines of data and more than, and everything else. So I'm trying to look down the road and see how soon I should call you, Chris. God, don't even finish what you're working on. Call me now, or let it go for 2 years and we'll worry about converting it. I don't know.
This is the type of thing where you might want to do some experimentation with to see if you can get it to work.
Okay.
But I just knowing the timelines that you are often tasked with, Rachel, I would hate for you to come to me, a month from now and say, I spent a month on this and it didn't work. Don't do that. I would hate for you to waste a month on something that is not designed to work in the way that you're necessarily wanting it to work today. So I would definitively say give it a shot, but I can't definitively say that it's going to work for you in doing what you want. Okay.
The solution that we have within SharePoint, I mean, I've made it work and it's fine, it's functional, and it'll work and everything else. I have concerns that as they iterate through this thing, and how these things go in 6 months. Well, now they want to add this thing, and then they want to add that, and then it's gonna, I don't know, bad things will happen. But so this sounds like it would be an interesting, fun, cool thing. I don't know how it would. All right, I'll have to think.
Yeah, no, so I'm trying it now, and I'm gonna say I wouldn't do it if it was me, but I think it's kind of the Jurassic Park principle of, even if you can do it, you might not want to.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. So
I had that conversation today with someone. So
yeah. So after this loads, right? So one reason I would say it's not easy enough to do is this is a slightly different, like, Canvas app editor tool than the standard one. So it doesn't have the info tab and the link to the Power App that you can use to embed it into SharePoint. So it's not easily giving you that information, which is a hint that maybe you don't want to do it. But all right, I'm creative. I can go farther than that. So now let me go into the admin center and see if it can give me an ID. Because I just need the ID, really.
right.
And then I could test it, but I don't even know here. It's not even telling me in the admin center kind of what the ID is to go at it. So the last thing I might try is like right click and use DevTools to try to pull it out of nowhere. But again, because I had to do all those steps is probably a pretty good hint that says they don't want you trying that.
If they're hiding it that hard, it's a good indication that they don't want you to find it and you should stop digging.
Yeah, and and again, your scenario would be people got to start using Teams. Microsoft's going that way. It's just the long-term answer. You're not going to get away from Teams later. So that's the hard truth that
I'm currently arguing with these people that they need to have the project managers not just go enter things in SharePoint and not submit an Excel spreadsheet first. That's where I am. My ability to convince them to leave SharePoint for Teams, that's so far down the road for these people.
You'd be surprised, though.
I don't disagree with you. It's just,
yeah,
I can only bring them along one step at a time.
Right. If you move them to SharePoint now and Teams later, though, you got to do this twice. If you jump forward, you just have to make the big change once, and then you're set for a while. So keep that in mind. I mean, I've done it. I've seen lots of teams and worked with lots of companies on it, and yeah, it's hard. But you just gotta go with the flow of the product. Otherwise, you're in trouble. And you're in the cloud now too. You have no control over the timing of the new feature and the deprecation of anything. That, again, that's how I would do it. But
right. I mean, right now it's working and it's stable and it's fine with standard SharePoint lists and lookups, and it's fine. Like I said, and I've already let them know that, hey, within 2 years you need to look at something else, because I don't think that'll be.
And I think it's just part of the conversation, like you're saying. It's that being transparent. It's a moving target, like John's saying, where yes, this will work for now. As you grow the data source, there's many entries being added. You figure out more about the app. You figure out more about the people, and then there's there might be a time to change. So or maybe it dies off. So yeah. I think it goes back to what Chris said earlier, where keeping it simple, start somewhere, and then once you need to kind of go back and revisit that, that's the time to make some changes.
And that's exactly why we did it this way, which is for now a SharePoint list will work, and it will work on a lot of levels. It's easy for the current people to be able to manage and add new things, and they can update it and they can do their things with it. It's super easy for Alfonso to be able to access and get it into Power BI so they can do all their crunching and numbering and things like that. And it will ease the PMs, I'm hoping, use it to ease them into an electronic interface that does not include Excel. If I can get everybody into this one world, making the jump in a year or two to something like this, I think will be less difficult. That's the story I'm telling myself inside my imagination. Please do not correct me.
Yeah, crawl, walk, run.
Please don't correct me. Please don't tell me how wrong I am. It's what lets me sleep at night. All right, but thanks. I kind of was hope. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe in 2 years it'll work that way. I don't know. We'll see.
You never know.
I mean, the way that lists are going too. I mean, they've expanded on that. So I mean, it kind of like you said, it's. You never really do know where Microsoft is going sometimes. Yep. Sometimes it's it's interesting.
Sometimes it's a pleasant surprise, and sometimes it's a brick wall.
Yep.
Yes. Like, oh, they never delivered the feature I wanted. Great.
Hey, there've been a couple of features they just delivered that I've been waiting for 10 years. So, yay, Microsoft.
Yes. So. Yep.
Anyway, thanks.
That's how we started off the call. I'm excited when you can, partner with Microsoft and see those solutions develop and evolve over time. They're very impressive with their ability to do that. All right. Any other questions or comments or items? This is my third major presentation of the day. I started off the day presenting to 70 engineers on how we're going to change the way we do analytics engineering at Rockwell. I then presented to the entire Power BI team at Microsoft, so like 300 to 600 people or something crazy like that, on where we're highly successful in implementing their solutions, and then some items that we see as major things that would help in implementing, to try and set some visionary items for Microsoft to address. At one point in time, I had some messages saying that people would like to see the types of things that we're asking for. Yes, it is beer o'clock. So as we're having a beer, was anyone interested in seeing these visionary statements that we've put out there for Microsoft on the Power BI side? This has nothing to do with SharePoint and nothing to do with other things. So I'm happy to not share this stuff, but some people sounded interested.
I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'd be curious just to get the 30-second overview of it.
Okay.
Yeah, just I kind of have a quick glimpse into your guys' world and kind of shed some light, because I probably even some of these SharePoint people and myself included, I am not a Power BI expert. I've been in there a few times, and I wouldn't say I've been super successful, but kind of poking around. It's good to learn those complementary tools.
Sure, and
that is why I am here. Complementary tools.
Right. Well, and in many ways, Microsoft makes it easy, right? It's got a wonderful low-code, no-code platform, but in some ways, they just continue to make it harder on themselves and the world around them. And so that's why we went through and we brought forward some items I presented to them that we see that would really help the platform. Number one, being clear resource usage and usage metrics and controls for users, right? So that people can take more, clear control of their destiny, the work that they're doing, understanding how and where things are or are not performing. I think there's this illusion that, we're in the cloud, we should have infinite compute and storage capabilities at all times. The reality is that's just not ever going to really happen, right? There's always going to be controls in place. There's always going to be throttles, limits, issues when it comes to performance and processing. So we should find a way to bring this more available and accessible to people. This would be exceedingly helpful, and to continue to iterate through feedback on this stuff so that it's not just a static MVP launch that sucks for the next 2 years before they come back to do an iteration on it where it sucks slightly less, but still sucks, right? Like, let's do more, right? The other piece was, let's turn Power BI into the Netflix for data. Let's find some transformative ways to bring those data assets that Rockwell's spending, millions and millions of dollars every year on analysts and licensing in our platforms, and all of that stuff to bring analytics to light. And many companies are in the same boat. Let's bring this forward in a way that's engaging and brings to light all of the information that is most relevant to users when they're accessing the information. And now, don't just bring forward individual metrics and like, hey, does this visual make any sense? Like, instead of that, bring forward the stories that are the Power BI reports that are most relevant for users, right? And find different ways to enhance that experience with, like, voting mechanisms, community forums, visual previews, all of these different things. I will say, after I presented, I had 10 people reach out specifically to get a shot of this slide from the Power BI team. So I think this is the one that they're most excited about. So fingers crossed. That's a good sign. They may have ignored me on everything else. Microsoft is already, I believe, well, we'll step back. It would be, one of the other asks is to add in the ability to have more of a conversation around the actual reports. So the more they can do to integrate the Power BI reports into teams and integrate conversations into the report experiences, the better, as well as having people be able to put in comments in charts, in graphs, in the reports that are out there would be exceptionally helpful as well, right? Like, if there's a spike or a dip or a hero or a villain that people see in there, it'd be great to be able to call that out inside that experience, right? Get people talking about what's going on inside the data. The other big ask is Microsoft just released composite models, which allows business users to take a model, take another model, and mash them together. This is going to be super easy for enterprises that have an uber advanced, centralized data warehouse with good surrogate keys that are centrally managed and are highly curated. I've never worked in a company like that. I've worked in companies that say they want to do that, and they work towards it, but it's never something that ever actually appears. So we were asking them to build in a robust surrogate key experience inside of the Power BI desktop that would enable users to basically add these in, create surrogate keys off business keys that are managed inside the experience to address late arriving data, new dimensions, these joins, that type of thing. And then we put out there the Spider-Verse challenge. This is, this hit me about like 8-9 months ago when I was on the elliptical one morning watching Spider-Verse, and I thought, wow, Spider-Man has come an amazing way from the old, 60s and 70s renditions of Spider-Man to all these just visual styles that just pop. You can feel what's going on inside there. I want to see the same thing happen inside the Power BI experience, so it becomes something that people can feel what's going on inside the data. I would love to see that visual get, a massive uplift forward. We're also looking for ways that Power BI can close that gap between our data science communities and our business users. Right now, our business users are lucky if they're in Power BI. Many of them are, but some are still trapped, outside of that space, right? Our data scientists, on the other hand, are leagues, light years away, operating in Python notebooks. We've been pushing hard for an offering called Power BI Notebooks that was on the roadmap, then it's off, but to bring that back so that we could bring those insights our data science community is building out and integrate that directly with the business so that they can take advantage of these insights, right? I did then highlight the number one reason I believe Microsoft and Power BI and all of these tools is it all goes back to how engaged Microsoft is with their community and is with the feedback that they get. The story I have is in 2012, I was working at a bank. I was working on their BI team. I was on a committee where we had just selected Tableau as the business intelligence platform that the bank was going to be using for a very long time. And while we were in the process of standing that up, I already supported an MSBI-based install. I was on a very early preview of Power BI, and I made a comment in a meeting about Power BI in which the product manager hunted down my phone number and called me up the next day to talk more about the feature, which was not difficult. And that, it was just a small thing that it needed at the time. Microsoft and the Power BI team turned that around inside 2 weeks. And when the new version came out 2 weeks later, the feature I'd asked was inside the service. And that got me to switch from the Tableau horse over to the Power BI horse. And I've been very happy ever since. So those were the items that I presented today to the Microsoft Power BI team that we see as visionary and critical to the continued success of the platform. Is new features like that, as well as Microsoft continuing to reach out and engage with the community and understand what really drives us forward.
Great.
Awesome. That's all I got for you guys.
Are you sure? You can't add a little something else in there? Want to do
Technically,
a
I could.
dynamics?
I can.
Dynamics 365. You wanted to cover something while we're here? All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Definitely. I'm thankful for your time, energy into this space. It was great overall. So, all right. With that, I think we're pretty good for today. Thanks all for joining. Different time of day. We were trying something different. It goes back and forth. We'll probably keep playing with that during the pandemic, when we're all kind of not moving around very much anyway. Morning, afternoon, kind of the same, right? I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. So we'll keep playing with it all. We'll get the recording out there soon, and have a good week.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thank you
Bye,
very much.
everyone. Thanks,
Bye,
Chris.
everyone. Thanks very
Bye.
much.
Thanks.